All right, time to take a look at the VEVOR spot welding dent puller. Okay, so we got our manual, we got our handle. At this point, we just got our most of me. All right, don't forget the dent puller at the bottom of the box. Oh, that's cool. Looks like we got kind of a little tackle box. Wow, look at all that. Ton of different tips and stuff. So I'm just going to get the handle on so I got something to grab onto. Okay, so that is a 5mm Allen. Okay, we got our slide hammer trigger, we got our ground. And those are hardwired in, so we don't have to worry about that. It says that the input's 110 volts at 20 amps and the output's 7 volts at 3,500 amps. So that is insane. That is why this cable is so thick. Then on the front, we got tools and power. So power is going to be where we're going to set essentially the intensity of the weld. Now in older machines, you would set the time and the voltage, and that's how you would get the power. With this one, it kind of does it automatically. All you have to do is select the tool, and it has a little guide right here. So number 1 is triangle, number 2, etc., etc. We got those in here. Now because car paneling is very thin, you want to set this at a very low number to start out with. See if that's going to work, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to overheat it, and then just gradually bring it up as the needs required. Now I already saw this super thick boy cable that we got right here. This is the ground, so the idea is you need to make sure that you're making contact with bare metal. So if there's paint on there, you need to scrape it off, and then you can use this to contact that to give you your ground. On the other side, you're also going to need to scrape the bare metal, and that's going to be where you're going to weld. And there is actually a bunch of different parts of this tool that kind of work independently. Now, this is the slide hammer attachment. So if you ever use the slide hammer, it's the same basic concept. You're just going to take this heavy weight, and it's got a nice rubber grip on it. You're going to slap that back, and that is going to drive whatever's on the front back. They're also smart enough to put a spring on the front, so in the event that you accidentally slam it forward, you're not going to have to worry about breaking the tool. The front of this is where all the magic happens. So you can see we got this attachment on there. So the tip of this is going to be where it actually welds. So you're just going to stick this onto the body panel, pull the trigger, and that's going to weld. Then you can slap this guy back and pull that dent out. And when you're done, you want to break this off, you can just kind of bend it back and forth or give it a twist, and that'll pop it off. Now the great thing about this is that you can use it over and over. So you can weld here, give it a pop, twist it off, go over here, give it a pop, twist it off, and just keep on doing that all over the place. And where that stands out against old traditional dent pullers is old ones you actually have to drill into the panel, then you would screw in the dent puller into that hole and pop that out. Now that's going to really weaken the metal. Whereas this one, where you use this, it's going to weld to it and it's going to leave a little mark, but it's not going to actually ruin the integrity of the metal. So you're going to be able to do better, stronger work with this than you would with an old dent puller. So on a torch, we got this locking collar right here. Drop that dent puller in, lock it back down, and now that is secured. Now because of the voltages we're working at, we want to make sure that we have a very good bond. Now you'll notice we got this, but we also got this. We got a whole nother dent puller. So the big difference between that one and this one is this one has a little handle on it. So this one is not intended to be electrified. This is just a physical slide hammer that you can use to pop dents out. Now the benefit for that, in here we have a couple of extra tools. So we got this coupler, so we can spin that on the end, and then we got this suction cup. If we just got something where we think we might not even have to use electricity for it, we use this, clean up the surface of the car, get this kind of wet, stick it on there, and you might be able to get the whole thing out just with this tool. That's awesome. Oh, I didn't even notice they actually have a wrench in here just for that color. That's cool. There's also a couple extra attachments. So there's this one. So you got a dent puller with a hook on the end. The idea with that one, you can see we got these copper rings and eyelets. They get us a whole bunch of these things too. And I mean, the cool thing about this is you can just reuse it a whole bunch of times. So like the only reason you would have to use another one is like if you lose one. But you can see that's the thing. So all you would do is you would use this, and you'd use it in the end of that tool, and you would weld that onto the panel, and you could use this hook to hook onto that. You can use that to pop it out. So if you have kind of a complicated dent, you can put a few of these things in there, have them already welded, and then just take this hook, slide it through, pop it out, move it to another one, pop it out, move it to another one, pop it out, and then just get that whole thing out nice and gradually. And when you're done again, just grab some pliers or something like that, give this a twist, pop it off, reuse it. So we got those eyelets, we got these regular copper rings, there's all kinds of options. And then this one is very neat. So you can see this head would attach the same way, you just thread it on, but then it has all these hooks, and these are all uniform. Now you might think putting all those rings on there, that'd be just a lot of effort, but what makes this special is you can put these ribbons on there. So if you have a dent in your car that was just like a straight slam, something like that, like a knife edge, you could take this, weld it to that, and just weld it at every single one of these valleys. Then you just take the hooks, and that fits on all the peaks. You can see there's springs on here, so these do kind of move in and out a little bit. There's a little bit of flexibility, and they also have slots in them, so they can go up and down depending on the dent. So you really have a lot of options depending on what kind of dent you have, but this will really help to get you a nice straight pull on that dent. So this is an awesome little tool. So the way you weld that is in this bag, we have this flat head, and it also doubles as a pointed head. But the idea is you would just take this, stick it on there, hit that weld, and then that will weld this ribbon onto that panel. So you just do that for each spot until you got it all the way down. We got a few other things in this. This is another head, so you can use this for holding this point. You can flip it around, use that point if you want. And with this, it completely bypasses that slide hammer. So you just put this directly into that torch tool. We got another one, very similar to it, but it is slotted. So that's gonna be what you use for welding on those eyelets or those washers. And then we got a whole mess of those triangle heads. So there is more points on here than I am ever gonna need to use. So that's awesome. There's one last part of this that's still pretty cool. There's a lot of parts of this that are pretty cool. But this, you can see it looks like full copper rods, but if you look at the end, you can actually see this is carbon. Now the point of this is just to heat up. So you're gonna put this in that tool, and then when you scrape that on the metal, it'll heat up the metal. Now there's a few uses for that. What the intended design for that for is because you've got expansion and contraction. As you heat that metal up, it's going to expand, and then if you cool it down rapidly, you can get it to contract. Now if you work that just right, because when a dent occurs, it kind of stretches that metal out, you can heat it up, cool it down rapidly, and it will shrink up a little bit. So that way you're not going to be left with a big dent. Now, using that effectively is more skill than I have. But it's still very cool that they have that in here. Now, what I can use this for is you can heat up that metal and it will make it a little bit more pliable, a little bit more flexible, and a little bit easier to pull that dent out if it's giving me trouble. Because the most important thing here is that we're not really welding with a full-on powered welder here. This is designed for welding metal that's very thin. If you try to hit thin metal with a full welder, it's just going to burn a hole right through it. This is designed for thinner metal. This is a much more precise tool. Now, if you've ever done soldering or anything like that, you know that if you're working on thicker metal, you have to use a much thicker soldering iron because you have to put a lot more heat into that metal in order to get that solder to stick. You got the same basic concept here. If you're working with thicker metal, you can heat that metal up a bit, get it kind of preheated, and then this will have a much better chance of adhering. So there's a lot of different options with this thing, and that's one of the things that I really like about it is just there's so much variety that you're almost guaranteed to find something that will work for your situation. Nothing's going to happen until I pull the trigger, so I'm just going to turn it on so you can see that we're on tool 1 at a power level of 5. So I'm going to change the tool. 1, 2, 3, should be 7. Yep, so we got a total of 7 different options, and those are listed right here. So we got our triangle, we got our washer, our eyelet, our ribbon. There's also an option for stud welding, so if you want to put a threaded stud onto that metal, you can use that to make that happen. Our carbon rod heating, and we also have an option for welding metal plates together. So this is very thin plates, but if you layer them together, you can actually use this to weld those plates together. So it says tool 1 is the triangle tool. If we wanted to go to, we'll say the eyelet, we just hit that. Go to 3, and the eyelet is number 3, so we just hit that. Now we're on eyelet. And then to change the power level, we can just bring this down or bring it up. And that's it. So from that point, we just put the ground on a piece of bare metal, stick it onto that panel, pull the trigger, and start working. So yeah, that is an awesome tool. So this metal is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So this is going to be way too thick for what this machine is designed for. I just want to see if I can get it to stick. Start out on a power level of 3, see what that gets. So it's not sticking very well with that, but again, this is very thick metal. There we go, we got some stick on there. There we go. Alright, right now it's on high. That actually sticks. I'm actually impressed because this has to get hot enough to actually weld to it, but it can't get so hot that it would melt through it. So being that this is thick metal, the fact that it can stick it on is actually kind of impressive. So definitely not designed for that 1/8 inch thick metal, but let's go ahead and try something a little smaller. So, I mean, one thing that you can do with this is you could just hold it on there. As long as you got a good bond, it would work. But if you want to get a real good bond, and you want to find a hole, this can actually fit it.
And the longer you leave it, bro, the more...
Well, it's got a certain time. It has a preset time, so it welds exactly how it's supposed to. But I mean, I guess we could weld it twice and see what happens if we do that. All right, good. It's about the same. But yep, it does stick. But we did get some movement out of it. So I'm going to try the carbon rod and heat it up a little bit. It's beautiful.
heating it up, bro?
Yeah, just apply heat to it. So you got the tip of that thing going. Oh yeah, it's heating it up a little. Alright, let's see what we get now. I'm gonna put it back to high. That's not sure. Okay, yeah, I guess it did make a little bit of a difference. Yeah, actually, I would say that's a lot better. Now, again, this is at the highest grade of metal that you're going to be wanting to use this for. It's at 0.8 to 1.2, and this is 1.2. So the lighter the metal, the more effective this is going to be. So we did get a little movement out of that. You can kind of see how it bent out right here. So it's kind of taking that shape. So I think this would take a while, but I mean, the biggest part about it is so you don't have a bunch of little holes in here. So it's retaining the structure of the metal. I'm going to try this on something a little thinner, but the more important thing is that this one is stainless steel. So I want to see if this can actually stick to stainless. I'm a little skeptical about that, but if it does, that would mean quite a bit for the future of this thing. Dave says he doesn't think it's going to stick. I'm not really sure. Yeah, Trinity doesn't think it's going to stick either. How am I going to get this? You know what? Grab this down here. All right, here we go. Nothing at 5. Just gonna go all the way to 10. Hey, it's stuck. That's good. Hey. No, they're definitely stainless. Otherwise, they'd be rusted when we take them out. Cool. So that's great. So there we, whew, that got hot. But yeah, there we go. That thing actually stuck, and it pulled it. So that's awesome. So if you get a car, like, you know, one of those vehicles that they're coming out with that are all stainless steel, this is going to be a way to actually get that thing to move without drilling holes in it. And you can't really bond a stainless steel car. That's cool. So yeah, that's awesome. That is actually a pretty cool tool. I think results may vary depending on the thickness of the metal, but if you're willing to do a little bit of work and you don't want to drill holes in the car, that's going to be a great tool to have.